Yeah, when we talk about the one in many, we also have to understand the force from within. What you'll find in our show is that we spend a lot of time trying to use the Kemetic terms. It's very important to use the language of your ancestors and to make sure that you don't offend them in any way. So we tend to use some of the Greek terminology that you've heard just because it's something you're familiar with, but we'll definitely tell you the original Kemetic terms. So when we talk about the force from within, many of you would say that that's God. In the Kemetic faith, we call it Nter, or you might have heard it as Netcher or Netzeru. There's several ways of pronouncing it. What you'll find in the ancient language, what some of you may have heard as hieroglyphics, we call the Meru Netter, or the Ntu Nter, is that since vowels weren't used that frequently in the language, that just like in any language, you'd have a dialect. There are people who may have pronounced it with different letters, different vowels. So you'll see that there are different pronunciations. But for the purpose of this show, when we refer to God, we are using the term Unter. So the Unter is the divine creative force. That's the force that rules all things. And when we talk about all things and the divine creation within self, what we're saying is that the Creator is everything. And that includes humans, that includes animals, that includes plants, that includes all things. And that one can be a divine force. What you also need to realize is that when we talk about Unter, that force is both female and male. So the divine force in itself, in the spelling of the word, the T being the feminine principle and the R being the masculine principle, we are discussing our Creator as both masculine and feminine. So when you're looking at your Creator, you're looking at yourself. And that's one important thing to realize when you're talking about the spiritual force.
Akhenaton or Akhenaten, who some people say is the father of monotheism. But clearly, if you're more familiar with the work of the Cushitic kings in the 25th dynasty, you'll become even more familiar with the fact that the ancient Egyptians always viewed their divine force as one single being. In fact, as we talk about the 25th dynasty, there's a really wonderful description of the divine power in ancient Egypt that has been recorded on what most people call the Shabaka stone. Shabaka is one of the Nsubiti, or pharaohs, as you may have heard, commonly known today, who comes forth from south of Egypt, of Kemet, and as he becomes the ruler of ancient Kemet, he decides that he's going to do something very curious for someone that what most people consider a foreign leader. He's going to begin to describe Kemetic philosophy, Kemetic spirituality from its essence. And so he actually goes back to one of the documents that he considers worm-eaten. That is, when he found it was in horrible condition. And he has it rewritten. This document is now known as the Shabaka stone and is often the best description and the earliest description of the divine force in our world. I mean, in that description, he describes Ptah. Ptah, this divine force that comes out of nothingness. Ptah is the creative force. And it said that he was a blacksmith. And in doing that, in the description called the creation of Ra as Ptah, and we'll talk more about this in future episodes, Ptah actually whittles each of these divine forces, these principles, from Asar, or known as Osiris, or Heru, known as Horus. He whittles them together, creates them, and in doing that, he creates these divine forces that we're more familiar with. And at the end of this entire description, he goes back and reminds us that each of them are nothing but the teeth, the hands and the feet of this one divine force. So it's a really wonderful description of the one in many.